Welcome to Midnight Affairs, where secrets unravel, desires ignite, and bold stories keep you on the edge. Tonight begins Chapter 1, our very first story where passion meets betrayal in the most gripping way. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. The house was eerily quiet, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the void. Alex Carter sat alone in the dimly lit living room, his eyes glued to the glowing numbers of the digital clock on the wall. 12:47 a.m. Sleep was a distant thought, pushed aside by a nagging unease that had been gnawing at him for weeks. Something was off. He could feel it in the way Evelyn, his wife of 10 years, had grown distant, her laughter sounding hollow, her once warm gaze now evasive. Then it happened. A hushed voice broke through the silence. Alex tensed, his ears straining to catch the faint sound coming from their bedroom down the hall. He stood slowly, careful not to make a sound as he moved toward the noise. His bare feet made no noise on the plush carpet as he approached the door, left slightly ajar. Through the narrow crack he saw her. Evelyn was sitting on the edge of the bed, bathed in the cold blue glow of her phone screen. Her voice was low, sharp, and urgent, a tone he hadn't heard in years. "I can't talk now." "He's home," she whispered, each word slicing through the air like a blade. Alex felt a cold chill run down his spine, his heart hammering against his ribs. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. Evelyn ended the call quickly, glancing toward the door before tossing her phone onto the nightstand. She slid under the covers, her movements quick and nervous as if she feared being caught. Alex stood frozen in the hallway, his breath shallow and uneven. Every instinct screamed at him to confront her, to demand an explanation, but something held him back. Instead he waited. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours, until her breathing evened out, signaling she had drifted into sleep. He slipped into the room like a shadow, his eyes locked on the phone. Hesitant but compelled, he picked it up. The screen lit up instantly, revealing a notification that sent his stomach plummeting. "Thanks for tonight, can't wait to see you again. Babe." His eyes scanned the sender's name, Claire. But Alex wasn't naive. The words didn't belong to a friend, and certainly not one with innocent intentions. The message spoke volumes, tearing through the fragile threads of trust that still held their marriage together. His chest tightened as he set the phone back down, careful not to make a sound. The weight of the revelation pressed heavily on him, but his jaw tightened with resolve. This wasn't just paranoia. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of insecurity. It was the beginning of something much darker, and Alex knew there was no going back. This was the moment his world began to crack, and he wasn't about to let it shatter without a fight. Alex sat in his car the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the windshield, but its warmth didn't touch him. His mind was a storm, spiraling through memories of their life together. 10 years. 10 years of marriage, laughter, love, and sacrifice. How had it come to this? How had the woman who once looked at him like he was her whole world become a stranger? He remembered the day they met, Evelyn, a vibrant force of nature, her laughter brightening the dullest of days. They'd bumped into each other at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. She had been late for work, spilling her drink in the rush, and Alex had offered her his. It was a small act, but it sparked something neither of them could have predicted. Within weeks, they were inseparable, their chemistry undeniable. Their wedding day stood out vividly in his mind, a day filled with promises and hope. Evelyn had walked down the aisle, her eyes brimming with tears of joy, and Alex had felt like the luckiest man alive. They had pledged their love in front of family and friends, their future stretched out before them like an endless horizon. The early years of their marriage were everything he'd dreamed of. Lazy Sunday mornings, spontaneous road trips, and long nights spent talking about their dreams. Evelyn had been his partner, his confidant, and his best friend. They'd built a life together brick by brick, weathering challenges and celebrating victories. But somewhere along the way, cracks had begun to form. Subtle at first, Evelyn's late nights at work, her dwindling enthusiasm for their shared traditions, her growing attachment to her phone. Alex had noticed the change but had chalked it up to the stress of her job. She'd always been ambitious, and he admired that about her. He thought of the nights she came home, her excuses piling up like a wall between them. "Just a tough day at the office," she'd say, brushing past him to retreat to the bedroom. Her kisses, once passionate and lingering, had become fleeting and obligatory. He told himself it was just a phase, that every marriage had its ups and downs. But now, in the stark light of day, he saw how blind he had been. He clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Alex wasn't a man who gave up easily. He had fought for everything he had. His career, his family, his marriage. But the message he'd seen last night replayed in his mind like a broken record. "Thanks for tonight, can't wait to see you again." Red heart, those words weren't just a betrayal. They were a challenge, a slap in the face to everything they had built together. Alex had always been a man of action. He prided himself on his strength, his ability to remain calm under pressure. And now, more than ever, he needed to channel that strength. This wasn't just about Evelyn's betrayal, it was about uncovering the truth. He needed to understand how deep the cracks ran, what had pushed her into the arms of someone else. But he also needed to be smart. Confronting her now would achieve nothing. She would deny it, twist the truth, or worse, accuse him of being paranoid. No, he needed evidence, undeniable proof of what she had done. Only then could he face her with the truth in hand and demand the answers he deserved. Alex took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He wasn't the type to wallow in self-pity or let himself be blindsided by lies. He loved Evelyn, but he wasn't a fool. If she thought she could betray him and get away with it, she was gravely mistaken. He started the car and pulled out of the driveway, his mind already formulating a plan. He would dig into her life, uncover every secret she was hiding. He wouldn't rest until he knew the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Because Alex Carter wasn't a man who turned away from a fight, especially not one for the truth. Alex sat at the kitchen table, his fingers drumming lightly on the edge as he watched Evelyn move around the kitchen. She was humming softly, a cheerful tune he hadn't heard from her in months. It was a stark contrast to the quiet tension that had hung over their house lately. She moved with precision, pouring orange juice into a glass, slicing toast, and setting plates down with an energy that felt almost performative. His eyes drifted to her phone on the counter, buzzing softly. She glanced at it quickly, her face unreadable, before flipping it face down without a word. The gesture wasn't new. She'd been doing that a lot lately, protecting her phone like it was a treasure chest of secrets. "Who's texting you so early?" Alex asked, keeping his tone casual, though there was a sharp edge just beneath the surface. She didn't miss a beat, flashing him a faint smile. "Just work." "Something about the budget report?" Or that was her answer for everything these days, her shield against any deeper questions. Alex forced a nod, masking the storm brewing inside him. It was the same excuse she'd used to explain her late nights, her sudden trips, her guarded demeanor. But it wasn't adding up, not anymore. "Dad?" A small voice broke the moment. Their 8-year-old son Jacob shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He climbed into his chair at the table and looked at Alex, then Evelyn. "Why does Mom stay so late at work now? I thought she said she'd help me with my science project. It's due in 2 days. The room went silent. Evelyn's smile faltered just for a split second before she recovered, letting out a forced laugh. "Work's been hectic, sweetheart," she said, crouching down to kiss Jacob on the head. "I'll help you tonight, okay?" Jacob shrugged, unconvinced, and reached for his toast. Alex's gaze didn't leave Evelyn. The cracks were starting to show. Her avoidance wasn't just hurting him, it was affecting their son. Later that afternoon, Evelyn announced she was taking a shower. Alex's heart pounded as the sound of running water filled the house. He stood outside the bedroom door for a moment, conflicted, before slipping inside. Her phone was still on the nightstand, locked but within reach. His fingers hovered over the screen before he finally swiped up. He knew her passcode, it hadn't changed since their anniversary 2 years ago. With trembling hands he entered it. The messages hit him like a freight train. A thread of texts with Claire filled the screen. Except Claire wasn't a she. The messages weren't about work or casual conversation. They were laced with flirtation, secrets, and something far more intimate. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Same place tonight?" Alex's breath hitched, his chest tightening as the words burned into his brain. The timestamps confirmed his worst fears. While he had been sitting at home with Jacob, Evelyn had been with someone else. Another message popped up as he stared. "Make sure he doesn't suspect anything. See you at 8? The shower turned off, jolting Alex into action. He quickly snapped screenshots of the messages, emailing them to himself. Every movement felt rushed, desperate, but he couldn't leave without proof. He placed the phone back on the nightstand, careful to leave it exactly as he'd found it. Evelyn stepped out of the bathroom moments later, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked at him with a soft smile as if nothing was wrong. "Hey, I'm thinking of making spaghetti for dinner. Sound good?" Alex forced a smile, his voice even. "Sounds great. I'm heading to the store. Need anything?" She shook her head, oblivious. "No, I'm good. Thanks." He turned and left the room, his smile vanishing the moment he was out of sight. The air felt heavier, the walls closing in around him. He sat in his car in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The evidence was undeniable now. Evelyn wasn't just lying, she was betraying everything they'd built together. But Alex wasn't the kind of man to act on impulse. He needed more proof, more leverage, more clarity. As he stared at the house, his jaw tightened. "You think I'll just sit here and take it?" he muttered, his voice low and firm. "You've underestimated me, Evelyn." The plan was forming in his mind piece by piece. He wouldn't confront her yet. Not until he had all the answers. Not until he was ready to flip the script. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The dining room was cloaked in an awkward silence, broken only by the faint clinking of silverware against plates. Alex sat across from Evelyn, his gaze locked onto her as she played with her food, her usual chatter suspiciously absent. He couldn't take it anymore. The weight of what he knew, the lies she'd been spinning, pressed down on him like a boulder. "Evelyn," Alex said, his voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." She looked up, startled, her fork pausing midair. "About what?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes darted nervously. "About where you were last night," he replied, leaning forward slightly. "And don't tell me it was work, because I know that's not true." Her eyes narrowed defensively and she set her fork down. "Alex, I already told you. I was finishing up some reports. Why are you acting like this?" His lips curled into a humorless smile. "Finishing reports? At 8 p.m.? He let the words hang in the air before adding, "Funny because your phone says otherwise." Her face paled, her composure cracking for a moment before she quickly recovered. "What are you talking about? Are you snooping through my phone now? Do you even hear how paranoid you sound?" "Paranoid?" Alex echoed, his voice rising slightly. He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapping the screen before sliding it across the table toward her. "Explain this then." Evelyn hesitated, her hands trembling as she picked up the phone. Her eyes darted over the screenshots of her messages with Claire. The color drained from her face, but she forced a weak laugh. "Alex, this is ridiculous. Claire is just a friend from work. Those messages are taken completely out of context." "Out of context?" Alex snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "Don't insult my intelligence, Evelyn. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again? That doesn't sound like work to me." Evelyn stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be accused of something I didn't do." "Yes, you do." Alex shot back, rising to his feet as well. His voice was filled with controlled fury. "You don't get to walk away from this, Evelyn. Not this time." She crossed her arms defensively, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Alex. It's not what you think. What I think." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You think I didn't see the way you've been acting? The late nights, the phone you guard like a secret, the lies? And now this." He gestured toward the phone. "You've been cheating on me, Evelyn. Just admit it." Her tears spilled over, but they didn't move him. She had used those tears too many times before to soften him, to make him doubt himself. "Not this time." I don't know what you want me to say," she stammered, her voice breaking. "You're twisting everything. You're turning this into something it's not." "Stop lying," Alex said coldly, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "For once in your life, stop lying and tell me the truth. Who is he?" Evelyn's lip trembled, but she didn't answer. She just stood there, her silence screaming louder than any denial could. Alex exhaled sharply, his hands gripping the back of his chair as he struggled to rein in his anger. "You know what? Don't bother. I don't need your confession. I already have the truth." He stepped away from the table, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with determination. "You think you can lie your way out of this? Manipulate me into doubting what I know? Not this time, Evelyn. I'm not the fool you think I am." Evelyn reached out, her voice desperate now. Alex, please, you're blowing this out of proportion. Can't we just what? He interrupted, his voice sharp. Pretend this didn't happen? Sweep it under the rug like everything else? No, Evelyn. This ends now. Her face crumpled, but Alex didn't waver. He turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. As he closed the door to his home office behind him, he leaned against it, his chest heaving. Her excuses only solidified his determination. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Evelyn sat in the corner booth of a dimly lit restaurant, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. She glanced around nervously, her gaze flitting to the entrance every few seconds. The restaurant wasn't the kind of place she and Alex would have gone to. A small, tucked-away spot on the edge of town that prided itself on privacy. The faint hum of jazz music played in the background, blending with the low murmurs of scattered conversations. Her heart skipped a beat when the door opened and he walked in. Patrick, with his confident stride and tailored suit, spotted her immediately and smiled. Evelyn's pulse quickened as he approached, sliding into the booth across from her. "You're late," she said softly, her tone a mix of relief and irritation. "Traffic," Patrick replied with a smirk, leaning forward. "But I'm here now." Evelyn felt a rush of emotions, guilt, excitement, and the thrill of secrecy. She knew this was wrong, knew she was playing a dangerous game, but Patrick made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. "You shouldn't have texted me this morning," she said, lowering her voice. "Alex is already suspicious. He's been asking questions." Patrick raised an eyebrow, his smile fading slightly. "Suspicious? How much does he know?" "Enough to make me worry," Evelyn admitted, sipping her wine to calm her nerves. "He confronted me last night. He's been checking my phone." Patrick's expression hardened. "You should have wiped our messages. I told you to be careful." "I did," Evelyn said defensively. "But he's not stupid, Patrick. He's watching me like a hawk." Patrick leaned back, crossing his arms. "Then maybe we should take a break, lie low for a while." Evelyn shook her head, her voice firm. "No, I can't do that. You don't understand, being with you is the only thing keeping me sane. I can't go back to what it was like before." Patrick softened, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Then we'll figure it out. We just have to be smart about this." They spoke in hushed tones, mapping out a plan to keep their meetings discreet. Patrick suggested they use a burner phone, something Alex couldn't track. Evelyn nodded, grateful for his calm, calculated approach. "What about tonight?" Patrick asked. "Should we cancel?" Evelyn hesitated but ultimately shook her head. "No. If I cancel, Alex will think I'm staying home for him. I'll tell him I'm working late again." Patrick smirked. He must be used to that excuse by now. Evelyn winced, a pang of guilt cutting through her. She looked away, staring into her wine glass. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said quietly. "I didn't want to hurt him." Patrick leaned closer, his voice low and persuasive. "Then don't think about it. Focus on us, Evelyn. You deserve to be happy." She met his gaze, her resolve wavering. Patrick had a way of making her believe his words, even when they felt hollow. As they finalized their plans, neither noticed the shadowy figure lingering near the entrance, watching from a safe distance. Alex had followed her, his suspicions driving him to the brink. He clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he watched the scene unfold. The intimate touches, the conspiratorial whispers. When Evelyn leaned in to kiss Patrick, Alex turned away, his stomach churning. He had seen enough. Unaware they were being watched, Evelyn and Patrick left the restaurant separately, agreeing to meet later that evening at their usual spot. This time, Alex wouldn't just be watching. This time he would act. Alex parked his car across the street from the restaurant, his knuckles gripping the steering wheel so tightly that they turned white. His mind raced as he replayed the scene he had just witnessed. Evelyn leaning close to Patrick, their heads tilted toward each other, the unmistakable intimacy in their body language. And then the kiss. The kiss that shattered the last threads of doubt he had clung to. His breath came fast and shallow, but he forced himself to calm down. This wasn't the time to lose control. He adjusted the mount on his dashboard, angling his phone's camera to capture the restaurant entrance. His instincts told him Evelyn and Patrick wouldn't linger inside for long. He needed to know their next move. The minutes stretched endlessly, each second heightening Alex's sense of urgency. Then the door opened and Evelyn stepped out. She hesitated on the sidewalk, her head turning nervously as if scanning for unseen eyes. Her face was calm but tinged with caution, a look Alex had come to know well over the past few weeks. She walked briskly to her car, her heels clicking on the pavement. Moments later, Patrick emerged. He kept his distance, his gaze following Evelyn as she unlocked her car. The two didn't exchange a word or even a glance, but Alex could see the unspoken coordination between them. His jaw tightened. They thought they were being clever but not clever enough. As Evelyn drove off, Alex followed at a safe distance. The familiar route brought a sinking feeling to his chest. She pulled into the parking lot of her office building, the same place she had claimed to be spending her late nights working. He parked across the street, his eyes fixed on her as she stepped out of the car and entered the building through a side door. For a moment, Alex questioned himself. Could he be wrong? Was he chasing ghosts? But then he thought of the texts, the lies, and the growing distance between them. No, this wasn't paranoia. This was the truth clawing its way to the surface. 20 minutes later, the side door opened again. Alex's stomach dropped as Evelyn stepped out, but she wasn't alone. A sleek black car pulled up beside her and Patrick was behind the wheel. She slid into the passenger seat without hesitation, and the car sped off into the night. Alex grabbed his phone, snapping photos as quickly as he could. The grainy images wouldn't win any photography awards, but they were damning enough. He followed them, keeping a safe distance, his pulse pounding with every turn. They drove to a small motel on the outskirts of town. Alex parked a block away, his car hidden in the shadows. He watched as they exited the vehicle, Patrick's hand brushing against Evelyn's back as they walked toward one of the rooms. Alex clenched his fists, his mind screaming at him to storm in, to demand answers. But he stayed put. This wasn't about anger or impulsiveness, it was about proof. He pulled out his phone again, filming as they entered the room together. His hands trembled, but his resolve never wavered. Every second he recorded felt like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. As the minutes turned into hours, Alex sat in his car, staring at the motel room door. The weight of betrayal bore down on him, but he refused to let it crush him. Instead, he scrolled through his phone, reviewing the evidence he had gathered so far. The texts between Evelyn and Patrick, the flirtatious messages, the dinner receipt from weeks ago that had planted the first seed of doubt. All of it painted a picture he could no longer deny. Finally, the door opened. Evelyn and Patrick emerged, their movements quick and discreet. Alex resumed filming, capturing the way they glanced around before walking to their cars. Patrick reached out, his hand brushing against Evelyn's arm in a gesture that spoke volumes. She smiled faintly before turning away and getting into her car. Alex followed Evelyn home, his mind racing with everything he had seen. When they reached the house, he parked in the driveway, watching as she stepped inside. Her face was calm, composed, as though she had spent the evening in a boardroom instead of a motel room. He entered a few minutes later, the sound of her heels clicking softly on the tiled floor echoing through the quiet house. She turned when she saw him, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice light as if nothing was amiss. "Couldn't sleep," Alex replied evenly, his gaze steady and piercing. She hesitated for a moment, then offered a faint smile. "It's been a long day. I'm going to bed." He nodded, watching her retreat down the hallway. His chest tightened, but he kept his emotions in check. This wasn't the time to confront her, not yet. Alex walked into the kitchen and set his laptop on the table. He transferred the photos and videos from his phone, organizing them meticulously into a folder he labeled Truth. Each image, each message, each video was a dagger to his heart, but also a weapon he could use. As he leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightened with resolve. Evelyn had made her choices, and now it was his turn. It was no longer about trust. It was about exposing the truth. Alex parked his car a block from the motel, his heart pounding as he watched Evelyn and Patrick exit the car and make their way toward the room. The grainy light from the neon motel sign illuminated their figures briefly before they disappeared inside. He clenched his fists, his emotions a storm of betrayal and rage. But he couldn't act now. Not yet. He needed more. He had been sitting in the car for almost an hour, his thoughts churning, when the motel door opened again. Evelyn stepped out, her posture tense, her head turning cautiously as she scanned the parking lot. Patrick followed a few steps behind her, Speaking in a low voice Alex couldn't hear from this distance. Suddenly, Evelyn froze, her gaze darting toward Alex's direction. He instinctively ducked, his heart racing as he realized she was looking at his car. Had she seen him? Seconds felt like hours as he waited, his breath shallow, his pulse hammering in his ears. Slowly, he peeked over the dashboard, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. Evelyn was still standing there, but Patrick had moved closer, touching her arm gently. "You're overthinking this," Patrick said, his voice faint but audible in the quiet night. "No one's following us. Relax." "I'm not so sure," Evelyn replied, her voice strained. She glanced toward Alex's direction again, her expression tight with unease. Alex held his breath, his mind racing. If she spotted him, everything would fall apart. He couldn't let that happen. Not when he was so close to the truth. Patrick's hand slid to the small of her back, guiding her toward her car. "Let's just leave separately like we planned." "You're letting your nerves get to you?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But I swear I felt like someone was watching us." They walked toward their cars and Alex slouched lower, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. He watched as they exchanged a few more hushed words before Evelyn climbed into her car. Patrick lingered for a moment, his sharp eyes scanning the area before getting into his own vehicle. Alex exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. They hadn't spotted him. Not this time. As Evelyn's car pulled out of the parking lot, Alex started his own engine and followed at a distance. He was careful, staying far enough back to avoid drawing attention. Evelyn's route was familiar, too familiar. She was heading home as though the night had been nothing more than another late shift at work. When they reached the house, Alex parked a few doors down, watching as Evelyn entered through the front door. Her movements were calm, composed. She had perfected the art of hiding in plain sight. He lingered for a moment, his mind replaying the near miss at the motel. She had been so close to catching him, so close to unraveling his plan. But Alex knew he couldn't let fear deter him. He had come too far and he wasn't about to stop now. Inside the house, Evelyn moved quietly, heading straight to the bedroom. Alex entered a few minutes later, the faint click of the door alerting her to his presence. "Alex? What are you doing up so late?" she called from the bedroom, her voice casual but tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Nervousness, perhaps? "Just went for a drive," he replied, keeping his tone steady. He walked into the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water as he steadied his racing heart. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly disheveled. "A drive? This late?" "Couldn't sleep," Alex said, meeting her gaze. "What about you? Long day at work?" She nodded quickly, her eyes darting to the clock. "Yeah, exhausting. I'm heading to bed now." "Good idea," Alex said, forcing a small smile. "You look like you need the rest." She lingered for a moment as if debating whether to say more, but then turned and walked away. Alex watched her go, the weight of the night pressing heavily on his shoulders. As he sat in the living room, staring into the darkness, his jaw tightened with resolve. This had been too close, but it wasn't over. Next time he wouldn't just watch, he'd take action. The next morning, Alex sat at the dining table, his laptop open and his mind racing. He stared at the folder labeled Truth, its contents heavier than the words could describe. Pictures, videos, and texts, all undeniable proof of Evelyn's betrayal. But it wasn't enough. He needed a moment that left no room for doubt or lies, a moment that couldn't be twisted by deflections or excuses. He had spent the night reviewing everything he had, piecing together a plan. When Evelyn's alarm went off, signaling the start of another day of lies, Alex was already 3 steps ahead. He watched her move through the house, her behavior so routine it was almost insulting. She poured coffee, kissed Jacob on the forehead, and grabbed her bag, all while maintaining the image of a dedicated wife and mother. "I'll probably be home late again," Evelyn said as she grabbed her keys. Alex leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Big meeting?" "Yeah, something like that," she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Alex nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "All right. Be safe." The moment she left, Alex sprang into action. This time he wouldn't follow her blindly. He had tracked her movements enough to know her routine, and he had a feeling where she was headed. He grabbed the small GPS tracker he had bought weeks ago and slipped outside, attaching it to her car before she could get too far down the street. Hours later, Alex sat in his car outside the same motel he had followed her to before. His phone screen displayed her location, the blinking dot confirming what he already knew: she was here with him. He gripped his phone tightly, his breath slow and steady as he forced himself to wait. Finally, the door to the room opened. Patrick stepped out first, smoothing his shirt and glancing around. Evelyn followed moments later, her hand brushing against his arm as they shared a quiet laugh. Alex's stomach churned, but he didn't let his emotions take control. This was it. He got out of his car, his phone already recording. His footsteps were slow but deliberate as he approached them. Patrick spotted him first, his smile faltering. "Who's that?" Patrick muttered, his voice low but tense. Evelyn turned, her face draining of color when she saw Alex. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. "Evelyn," Alex said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Having a productive day at work, I see." "Alex," she stammered, stepping back. "What are you doing here?" Patrick's expression shifted to defensive arrogance. "Who the hell are you?" Alex's eyes flicked to him, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "I'm her husband." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Patrick shifted uncomfortably, his confidence wavering. Evelyn's face crumpled, her mask of composure slipping entirely. "Alex, this isn't," she began, but he held up a hand, silencing her. "Don't," he said coldly. "Don't insult me with another lie." He raised his phone, the screen still recording. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around and thinking I wouldn't find out. But I did. I have everything, pictures, texts, videos. Do you want to see them?" Evelyn's hands trembled, her face pale. "Alex, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," he snapped, his voice rising. "You made your choice, Evelyn. You chose him over your family, over our marriage. Was it worth it?" Patrick stepped forward, his hands up in a placating gesture. "Look man, this isn't necessary. Let's just talk." Alex's glare silenced him. "Talk? With you? The man who's been sleeping with my wife." He took a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to talk." Evelyn reached out, her voice desperate. "Alex, please. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never meant to hurt you." Alex shook his head, his jaw tight. "Hurt me? You didn't just hurt me, Evelyn. You betrayed me. You betrayed Jacob. You threw away everything we built for what? Some cheap thrill?" Tears streamed down her face, but Alex felt nothing but cold determination. He had seen enough, heard enough. This wasn't a woman who made a mistake. This was a woman who made a series of deliberate choices. He turned his back on both of them, his chest heaving as he walked away. Evelyn called after him, her voice cracking, but he didn't stop. When he reached his car, he looked at the phone in his hand. The recording had captured everything, her reaction, her lies, her guilt. He knew what he had to do next. As he drove away, his jaw clenched and his eyes steely, one thought echoed in his mind. This wasn't just betrayal, it was war. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the dining table where Alex sat, staring at his laptop. His gaze was fixed on the folder labeled Truth, a collection of evidence so damning it could tear Evelyn's carefully constructed life apart. Photos, videos, texts, every piece of proof meticulously gathered and arranged. But it wasn't enough to satisfy the fire burning inside him. He had spent the night replaying the confrontation at the motel in his mind, Evelyn's pale face, Patrick's defensive arrogance. Their betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a challenge. And Alex wasn't a man who backed down from a challenge. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This wasn't the time for impulsive action. If he was going to bring them down, he needed a plan, calculated, precise, and devastating. Alex grabbed his phone and dialed his lawyer, an old college friend named Marcus who had seen him through countless business deals and a few minor disputes. "Marcus, it's Alex. I need to talk. It's urgent." Marcus's voice was sharp and professional. "Alex? What's going on?" "It's Evelyn," Alex said, his voice cold. "She's been having an affair and I've got all the proof I need. I need to know my options." There was a pause on the line before Marcus replied, his tone cautious. "All right. First let's meet. Bring everything you've got. We'll go over it together and figure out the next steps." "Good," Alex said. "I'll see you this afternoon." He ended the call and leaned back in his chair, his mind already working through the logistics. The legal side was just the beginning. He wanted more than a divorce. He wanted accountability, public, undeniable accountability. He opened his email and began drafting a message to Evelyn's boss. The company she worked for prided itself on integrity and professionalism. Alex doubted they'd turn a blind eye to an affair between colleagues, especially one as blatant as hers. He attached a few incriminating photos and videos, ensuring they painted a clear picture without revealing too much. Next, he turned his attention to social media. He had no intention of airing their dirty laundry in public. Yet. But he began collecting the names of mutual friends, colleagues, and family members, creating a list of people who needed to know the truth when the time came. By the time noon rolled around, Alex felt a grim satisfaction. He wasn't rushing into this. He was building a strategy brick by brick. He packed his laptop, a folder of printed evidence, and a notepad before heading to his meeting with Marcus. Marcus's office was sleek and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos Alex felt inside. As he laid out the evidence, Marcus's expression shifted from curiosity to concern and finally to resolute determination. "This is solid," Marcus said, flipping through the photos and texts. "There's no way she can deny this." "But Alex, are you sure you want to take this public? Divorce courts don't typically look kindly on vindictive tactics." Alex's jaw tightened. "This isn't about vindictiveness. It's about justice. She didn't just cheat on me, she betrayed our family, our son. And her affair partner? He's not walking away from this unscathed either." Marcus nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Legally, you're on solid ground, especially with the proof you've gathered. But you'll need to be strategic. The court will favor you if you come across as measured and focused on Jacob's well-being." "I've already started working on that," Alex said, pulling out his notepad. He explained his plans to contact Evelyn's employer, their inner circle, and anyone else who could hold her accountable. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "It's bold, Alex. Risky too. But if you're committed, I can make sure we stay within the bounds of the law." Alex nodded. "Good. I'm not interested in crossing any lines. I just want to make sure they can't squirm their way out of this." That evening, Alex sat in his office at home, reviewing his plans once more. He had a timeline, a list of actions, and a growing determination that burned brighter with every passing hour. He wasn't acting out of spite or desperation. He was reclaiming control. As he glanced at a photo of Jacob on his desk, his resolve hardened further. This wasn't just about him. It was about protecting his son from the fallout, about showing him that strength wasn't about avoiding pain, it was about facing it head-on. He picked up his phone and sent the email to Evelyn's boss, watching as it disappeared from his outbox. It was the first step in a series of actions that would dismantle the lies she had built around her. He closed his laptop and stood, his shoulders straight and his jaw set. He wasn't going to break, not now, not ever. He wasn't going to break, he was going to break them. Alex stood outside the high-rise office building, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and resolve. The steel and glass tower loomed above him, a stark contrast to the simmering emotions within. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. Today, Patrick would face the consequences of his actions. With a deep breath, Alex pushed through the revolving doors and strode into the bustling lobby. His sharp eyes scanned the directory before he headed for the elevators. The ride-up was tense, each ding of passing floors only fueling his determination. When he reached the 12th floor, he stepped out into a sleek, open office space. A receptionist glanced up, offering a polite smile. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Alex replied curtly. "I'm here to see Patrick Caldwell." The receptionist's brow furrowed. "Mr. Caldwell is in a meeting. Can I?" "I'll wait," Alex interrupted, his tone firm. He walked past her desk, ignoring her protests, and spotted Patrick through the glass walls of a conference room. He was seated at the head of the table, speaking confidently to a group of colleagues. Alex didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed open the door, the sudden intrusion halting the discussion mid-sentence. All eyes turned to him, confusion and surprise etched on their faces. "Patrick Caldwell," Alex said, his voice steady but cold. Patrick looked up, his face paling as recognition set in. "Alex?" The room went silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Patrick stood, his expression a mix of confusion and discomfort. "What are you doing here?" Alex took a step closer, his gaze never wavering. "I'm here to talk about you and my wife." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Patrick's colleagues exchanged stunned glances, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. "This isn't the time or place," Patrick said, his voice low and defensive. "Oh, I think it's the perfect time and place," Alex shot back. He pulled his phone from his pocket, holding up a video. "Care to explain this?" Patrick's face turned crimson as the footage of him and Evelyn at the motel played on the screen. The murmurs in the room grew louder, the weight of the evidence impossible to ignore. I don't know what you think you're doing," Patrick stammered, his usual composure crumbling. "I'm doing what you clearly didn't have the courage to do," Alex said, his voice sharp. "Owning up to the truth. You thought you could sneak around behind my back, disrespect me, and destroy my family? Did you really think I'd just let that slide?" Patrick glanced nervously at his colleagues, many of whom were now openly staring in disbelief. "Alex, let's take this outside. We can talk." "No, we're talking right here," Alex snapped, his voice rising. "You're a fraud, Patrick. You pretend to be this respectable professional, but behind closed doors, you're a coward who preys on someone else's wife. Everyone in this room deserves to know exactly who you are." Patrick's attempts to calm the situation only made it worse. "You don't understand?" "No, Patrick, I understand perfectly," Alex interrupted, his tone scathing. "You're a selfish, manipulative liar. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed your own integrity, your colleagues, and anyone who ever trusted you." The room was electric with tension. Patrick's colleagues looked at him with a mix of pity and judgment, the veneer of his professionalism shattered in an instant. Patrick finally snapped. "All right, yes, I made a mistake. Is that what you wanted to hear?" "No," Alex said coldly, his eyes narrowing. "What I want is for you to face the consequences of your actions. And trust me, Patrick, you will." Alex turned to the stunned room. "You all deserve to know the kind of man you're working with. He didn't just betray me, he betrayed his own standards. Be careful who you trust." With that, Alex stepped back, the silence in the room deafening. He gave Patrick one last glare, his voice low and venomous. "You'll wish you'd never crossed me." Without waiting for a response, Alex turned and walked out of the room, leaving Patrick to face the judgment of his peers. Outside the office, Alex felt a rush of grim satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Justice wasn't served yet, but the wheels were in motion, and he wasn't stopping until it was complete. The air in the banquet hall was thick with chatter and laughter as family, friends, and colleagues gathered to celebrate Evelyn's parents' anniversary. The event was lavish, a testament to the family's emphasis on appearances. Alex stood near the entrance, scanning the room. His heart pounded, but it wasn't nerves, it was anticipation. This was the moment he'd been preparing for. Evelyn was across the room, her laugh ringing out as she entertained a small group of relatives. She looked radiant, her smile practiced and perfect, a facade Alex knew all too well. He spotted Patrick, lingering near the bar, casually sipping a drink and engaging in light conversation as though nothing in the world could touch him. Alex tightened his grip on the folder in his hand. Inside was every piece of evidence, texts, photos, videos, that exposed their affair. He had debated the morality of doing this here at a family event, but the time for second-guessing was over. "Alex, you made it." Evelyn's mother greeted him warmly, pulling him into a hug. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Alex replied, his tone even but his gaze locked on Evelyn. The moment Evelyn saw him, her smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the folder in his hand, and her expression shifted to thinly veiled panic. She excused herself from the group and hurried toward him. "What are you doing here?" she hissed under her breath, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. "I'm here for the truth," Alex said coldly. "And tonight everyone gets to hear it." Her face paled. "Alex, don't do this. Not here. Please." "Why not?" Alex shot back, his voice just loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "You weren't too concerned about the consequences when you snuck around with him, were you?" "Alex," Evelyn started, but he cut her off. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex said, his voice commanding as he stepped toward the center of the room. The chatter quieted and all eyes turned to him. Evelyn's father frowned, stepping forward. "Alex, what's going on?" "I'd like to apologize for interrupting this beautiful evening," Alex began, his voice steady despite the fire raging inside him. "But there's something I think everyone here deserves to know." Evelyn moved to his side, her face red with panic. "Alex, stop. Don't do this." Patrick, standing near the bar, froze mid-sip, his expression shifting to one of dawning horror. "This," Alex said, holding up the folder, "is a collection of evidence proving that my wife, Evelyn, has been having an affair with Patrick Caldwell." Gasps erupted throughout the room. Evelyn's mother clutched her chest, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Alex opened the folder, pulling out printed screenshots of texts and emails. "Here's a conversation between Evelyn and Patrick, where they discuss their latest motel meeting. And here," he held up a photo, "is a picture of them entering that motel together. There's more, videos, timestamps, messages, but I think this paints the picture clearly enough." Evelyn's knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the back of a chair for support. "Alex, stop. Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. Patrick, now the focus of a dozen glares, stepped forward. "All right, that's enough," he barked, trying to regain some semblance of control. "This isn't the place for this." "You're right," Alex said, turning his icy glare on Patrick. "The place for this was before you decided to sleep with another man's wife." Patrick's confidence wavered, his attempts to speak drowned out by murmurs of outrage and whispered judgments. In the midst of it all, Jacob, their 8-year-old son, stepped out from behind Evelyn's parents. "Dad?" he said, his small voice trembling. The room fell silent. Alex's chest tightened as he knelt to meet Jacob's wide, confused eyes. "Hey buddy," he said gently. "What's happening?" Jacob asked, glancing between Alex and Evelyn. "Why's everyone so mad?" Alex swallowed hard, his voice breaking slightly. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, Jacob. Big ones. But I promise you I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Evelyn sobbed openly, her mask of composure shattered. Patrick looked around, the weight of judgment pressing down on him as he realized there was no escaping this humiliation. Alex rose, his voice regaining its steel edge as he addressed the room. "I didn't do this to hurt anyone, but I won't stay silent while my family is destroyed by lies and betrayal. You all deserve to know the truth." He turned to Evelyn, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "You did this to yourself. And now everyone knows who you really are." As Alex walked toward the exit, leaving the stunned crowd behind, he felt no regret. Evelyn's cries and Patrick's stammered excuses faded into the background. This wasn't just betrayal, it was justice. The house was silent when Alex arrived home later that night. The weight of what he had done at the anniversary party lingered in the air, but it didn't crush him, it steadied him. He had exposed Evelyn and Patrick for who they truly were, and now it was time to finish what he had started. Evelyn was waiting for him in the living room, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, but Alex felt no sympathy. She looked up as he entered, her voice trembling. "Alex, please, we need to talk." He dropped his keys on the table and stood across from her, his arms crossed. "Talk? Now you want to talk? After weeks of lies, sneaking around, and humiliating me in front of our son?" Evelyn flinched, fresh tears pooling in her eyes. "I know I messed up. I don't even know where to start. But I never wanted to hurt you." Alex let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You didn't want to hurt me? What exactly did you think would happen, Evelyn? That I'd never find out? That you could live this double life without consequences?" "I was lost," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I felt like I wasn't enough. I thought Patrick—" "Don't," Alex interrupted sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Don't even say his name. You don't get to justify this. You don't get to stand there and play the victim. You had a choice, Evelyn, and you made it. Over and over again." Evelyn's tears flowed freely now. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but Alex, please think about Jacob. Think about our family. We can get through this. Jacob is the only reason I'm even standing here right now," Alex said coldly. "But as for us, there is no us anymore." Evelyn's sobs grew louder, but Alex didn't waver. He pulled a folder from his bag and placed it on the coffee table. "This is everything. The texts, the photos, the videos. It's going to the lawyer in the morning." Her eyes widened in panic. "Alex, no. Please don't do this. Think about what this will do to Jacob." "I am thinking about Jacob," Alex snapped. "And that's why I'm making sure he doesn't grow up watching his father tolerate betrayal and lies. He deserves better. I deserve better." Evelyn fell to her knees, clutching his arm. "I'll do anything, Alex. Please just don't leave. Don't tear our family apart." Alex pulled his arm away, his voice steely. You tore this family apart the moment you decided I wasn't enough. The moment you chose him over us. The sound of small footsteps interrupted them. Jacob stood in the hallway clutching his stuffed dinosaur, his eyes wide with confusion. Mom? Dad? Why are you yelling? Alex's chest tightened as he knelt down to his son's level. Hey buddy, he said gently. Mom and I are just having a grown-up conversation. Jacob's lip quivered. Are you mad at Mom? Alex hesitated, his heart breaking. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Jacob. Big ones. But I need you to know that I love you more than anything in the world. That will never change. Jacob threw his arms around Alex's neck, and Alex held him tightly, his resolve hardening. He stood, carrying Jacob back to his room and tucking him in. When he returned to the living room, Evelyn was still on the floor, her face buried in her hands. Alex, she whimpered, what happens now? Alex stood tall, his voice unwavering. What happens now is simple. I'm filing for divorce. I'm taking control of my life. And I'm making sure Jacob grows up in a home where truth and respect matter. Evelyn looked up at him, her face crumpling. You're really doing this? Yes, Alex said firmly. This isn't the end for me, it's the beginning. Without another word, Alex turned and walked out of the room, leaving Evelyn sobbing in the wreckage of her own making. As he closed the door to his bedroom, a sense of calm washed over him. The battle was over, but his future was just beginning. The morning after the confrontation, Alex woke up to the faint sound of birds outside his window. For a moment there was peace, a fleeting illusion before the reality of his fractured life crept back in. The house was quiet, save for Jacob's muffled laughter drifting from the living room. Alex got out of bed and made his way downstairs, bracing himself for the day ahead. Jacob was on the couch, his stuffed dinosaur in one hand and a cartoon playing on the TV. Seeing his son's small smile brought a pang to Alex's chest. The innocence in Jacob's face was both a comfort and a reminder of the responsibility he now bore alone. Morning, buddy, Alex said, ruffling Jacob's hair as he sat next to him. Morning, Dad. Jacob chirped, his eyes not leaving the screen. But after a moment he turned, his expression more serious. Are you and Mom still mad? Alex hesitated, taking a deep breath. He had rehearsed what he would say, but the words still felt heavy. No, Jacob. We're not mad anymore. But sometimes when grown-ups have big problems, they can't fix them together. Jacob's lip quivered. Does that mean you and Mom aren't going to live together anymore? Alex's throat tightened, but he forced himself to meet his son's gaze. Yes, buddy. It means that. But you'll still see both of us and we'll always love you. That's never going to change. Jacob's small arms wrapped around Alex's neck, and Alex held him close, willing himself to stay strong. I love you, Dad, Jacob whispered. I love you too, buddy. More than anything. As the day unfolded, the house was a mix of quiet tension and awkward silences. Evelyn stayed in the guest room, avoiding Alex and Jacob. Her once commanding presence in the house felt diminished, like a shadow lingering where light once shone. Alex didn't go out of his way to confront her. He had said everything he needed to the night before. Instead he focused on Jacob. They played board games, built Lego towers, and even baked cookies together, filling the house with laughter that felt fragile but genuine. For Alex, every moment spent with his son was a reminder of what truly mattered. But as evening approached, the weight of the emotional fallout began to settle in. When Jacob was tucked into bed, his question still lingered in Alex's mind. Why did this happen? Was it my fault? Alex had assured Jacob that none of it was his fault, but the pain in his son's eyes cut deeper than any betrayal ever could. Later that night, Alex found himself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He was exhausted not just physically but emotionally. The enormity of what lay ahead loomed over him. Lawyers, custody arrangements, the logistics of rebuilding a life that had been shattered. Evelyn entered the kitchen quietly, her face pale and drawn. She hesitated at the doorway as though waiting for permission to step inside. Alex didn't look up but acknowledged her with a curt nod. I just wanted to say, Evelyn began, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. For everything. Alex raised his eyes to meet hers, his expression unreadable. Sorry doesn't fix this, Evelyn. It doesn't fix what you did to me, to Jacob. I know, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I want to make this right somehow. Alex exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You can't make it right. The damage is done. The only thing you can do now is be a good mother to Jacob. That's all I care about. Evelyn nodded, her shoulders slumping. I'll do whatever it takes. You should have thought about that before, Alex said, his voice devoid of emotion. We'll figure out the logistics. But I'm not doing this for you, I'm doing this for Jacob. She left the room quietly, leaving Alex alone once more. He stared out the window, his reflection barely visible against the darkened glass. The fallout was messy, painful, and far from over, but for the first time in weeks, Alex felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't broken. Jacob wasn't broken. They would heal, together. Evelyn sat alone in the guest room, her back pressed against the headboard and her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. The room felt cold, unwelcoming, a far cry from the warmth of the bedroom she had once shared with Alex. She glanced around at the bare walls, the impersonal furniture, and the suitcase she hadn't yet unpacked. It struck her how easily her life had unraveled, leaving her stranded in a space that felt as unfamiliar as her reflection in the mirror. She had tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, the memories of the past few days came rushing back. The public humiliation at her parents' anniversary party, Alex's cold fury, and the devastated look in Jacob's eyes haunted her. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt completely, utterly alone. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand and she reached for it with trembling hands. A message from Patrick. We need to talk. Call me. She stared at the text for a long moment before setting the phone down without replying. Patrick was the last person she wanted to hear from. His promises, his reassurances, they all felt empty now, like a cruel joke she had willingly played on herself. She had convinced herself that he was an escape, a source of excitement and validation. But now, in the harsh light of reality, she saw him for what he truly was. A man who had taken advantage of her weaknesses and left her to pick up the pieces alone. A soft knock on the door startled her. She quickly wiped her face, realizing tears had been streaming down her cheeks. Come in, she said hoarsely. The door creaked open and Jacob peeked inside, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Mom? Can I sit with you? Her heart ached at the sight of him, his small face filled with a mixture of confusion and sadness. Of course, sweetheart, she said, forcing a smile as she patted the bed beside her. Jacob climbed up, settling into her side. Dad said you and him are having grown-up problems. Is that why you're in this room now? Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Yes, honey. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and it makes things hard. But I love you so much and that will never change. Jacob nodded slowly. I love you too, Mom. But I don't like when you and Dad are sad. Evelyn pulled him into a hug, her tears falling freely now. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I wish I could fix everything, but I promise I'll always be here for you. After a few moments, Jacob yawned and slid off the bed. Good night, Mom. He paused at the door, looking back at her. I hope you and Dad can fix it. As the door closed, Evelyn crumpled. She buried her face in her hands, the weight of Jacob's words crushing her. She had failed him just as she had failed Alex. For years, she had let resentment and dissatisfaction fester, convincing herself that her choices were justified. Now, the reality of those choices stared her in the face, unrelenting in its judgment. The next morning, Evelyn forced herself out of bed. She couldn't afford to wallow, not when Jacob needed her. She made her way to the kitchen, hoping to at least share a meal with him. But when she entered, the sight stopped her in her tracks. Alex was at the table with Jacob, both of them laughing as they poured syrup over their pancakes. The scene was so normal, so happy that it felt like a punch to the gut. She stood frozen, unsure of whether to interrupt. Jacob noticed her first. Mom. Dad made pancakes. Want some? Alex's expression hardened as his eyes met hers, but he said nothing. Evelyn forced a smile and nodded. Sure, sweetheart. As she sat down, the tension in the air was palpable. Alex was civil but distant, his responses to her attempts at conversation clipped and neutral. She couldn't blame him. She had destroyed the trust they had built over a decade, and now she was nothing more than a guest in her own home. After breakfast, Evelyn retreated to the guest room, her isolation growing heavier with each passing moment. She thought of all the things she had taken for granted: Alex's steadfast love, Jacob's innocence, the stability of their family. In her pursuit of something more, she had lost everything that truly mattered. She stared at the mirror, her reflection a stark reminder of the woman she had become, a woman she barely recognized. The regret was suffocating, but it was accompanied by a gnawing sense of helplessness. She didn't know how to rebuild the bridges she had burned or if it was even possible. As the day wore on, Evelyn sat by the window watching Jacob and Alex play catch in the yard. The sound of their laughter drifted inside, both comforting and devastating. She realized with a pang that Alex no longer needed her in the same way. He was moving forward, building a life with their son that no longer revolved around her. Evelyn's isolation deepened, but so did her resolve. If there was any chance of earning back a shred of respect, of being the mother Jacob deserved, she would have to face the consequences of her actions and fight for redemption. For now, though, all she had was regret, and the understanding that it was hers to bear alone. Alex stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The soft glow of morning painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a serene backdrop to the whirlwind his life had become. It had been weeks since he had confronted Evelyn, exposed her betrayal, and made the decision to move forward without her. Though the wounds were still fresh, the dawn of a new day brought a sense of quiet determination. Inside, the house was alive with the sound of Jacob's laughter. Alex smiled to himself as he stepped inside to find his son sitting at the kitchen table, a milk mustache adorning his upper lip. "Dad, look. I finished the maze in my puzzle book," Jacob exclaimed, holding up the book triumphantly. "That's awesome, buddy," Alex said, ruffling Jacob's hair. "You're getting too smart for me." Jacob giggled, his bright eyes shining. The sight filled Alex with hope. He knew that no matter how messy the past had been, his priority was clear: building a stable, happy life for his son. Later that day, Alex stood in his home office, sorting through a stack of papers. Among them were brochures for local parenting groups and community events. He had decided to take a more active role in Jacob's life, not just as a father but as a role model and constant presence. He wanted Jacob to grow up knowing the importance of honesty, resilience, and love. As Alex worked, his phone buzzed. It was a message from a former colleague, asking if he would be interested in consulting on a project. Alex hesitated for a moment, then replied with a simple, "Let's talk." It was a small step, but it was one toward reclaiming the career he had put on hold for too long. That evening, Alex and Jacob sat on the couch, surrounded by a mess of popcorn and blankets. They were watching a nature documentary, Jacob's favorite. "Dad," Jacob said suddenly, looking up at him, "do you think we'll always be okay?" Alex paused, his chest tightening at the question. He placed an arm around Jacob's small shoulders and pulled him close. "We'll always be okay, buddy. As long as we stick together, we can handle anything." Jacob nodded, a content smile spreading across his face as he snuggled against his father. In the weeks that followed, Alex's life began to take on a new rhythm. He and Jacob started attending a weekend hiking group, exploring trails and enjoying the outdoors together. Alex also began volunteering at Jacob's school, using his expertise to help organize events and coach the soccer team. One evening, while preparing dinner, Alex found himself humming a tune, a small but telling sign that joy was creeping back into his life. He glanced over at Jacob, who was drawing at the table, his tongue sticking out in concentration. "What you working on over there?" Alex asked. Jacob held up his drawing, a picture of the two of them hiking up a mountain with the words Team Carter scrawled at the top. Alex chuckled, his heart swelling with pride. "That's perfect. We really are a team, aren't we?" Jacob beamed. "Yep. Team Carter forever." The following weekend, Alex hosted a small barbecue, inviting a few close friends and neighbors. It was the first time he had opened his home since the fallout with Evelyn, and while he felt a pang of discomfort, it was outweighed by the warmth of connection and laughter filling the backyard. "Feels good to see you smiling again," one of his friends said, handing him a drink. Alex nodded, watching Jacob chase after a soccer ball with the other kids. "It does. Took me a while to get here, but I think I'm finally moving forward." "You're doing great, Alex. It's not easy, but you've handled it with strength." Alex took a sip of his drink, letting the words sink in. For so long he had felt like his life was defined by betrayal and loss, but now he saw the beginnings of something new, a life rebuilt on trust, love, and resilience. As the sun set that evening, Alex sat on the porch with Jacob, watching the stars appear one by one. "Dad," Jacob said softly. Today was the best day ever. Alex smiled, wrapping an arm around his son. There are going to be so many more best days, buddy. Just you wait. For the first time in months, Alex felt a deep sense of peace. The past was behind him and the future stretched out before him, full of possibility. Have you ever wondered what you would do if the person you trusted most betrayed you? How would you handle the pain, the anger, and the heartbreak? Would you crumble under the weight of it, or would you rise stronger and more determined than ever? Welcome back to Midnight Affair, where we bring you stories of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. If you've been captivated by Alex's journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales. Alex stood on the porch once again, a cup of coffee warming his hands as he watched Jacob run through the yard, chasing the family dog. The laughter echoing across the lawn filled him with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. The storm had passed, and though it had left scars, it had also left lessons, ones that Alex would carry with him forever. He had learned that betrayal didn't define him. The choices of others, no matter how hurtful, didn't determine his worth. What mattered was how he chose to respond, and Alex had chosen to rise above. Inside the house, things were quieter now. Evelyn had moved out, and while their interactions were limited to co-parenting Jacob, they were civil. She had offered apologies, even tried to mend things in her own way, but Alex knew there was no going back. His focus was on moving forward, not looking back. One evening, Alex sat with Jacob at the kitchen table, helping him with a school project about heroes. Jacob, in his innocent wisdom, had chosen his dad as his subject. Why me? Alex asked, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Because you never gave up, Jacob said matter-of-factly. You're always there for me, and you're the bravest person I know. The words struck Alex deeply, more than he expected. Thanks, buddy. That means a lot to me. It's true, Jacob said, his eyes shining with admiration. You're my hero. As they worked on the project together, Alex realized that rebuilding his life wasn't just about himself. It was about setting an example for Jacob. Showing him that even when life knocked you down, you could stand back up, stronger and more determined than before. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Alex found new opportunities opening up. He had taken on consulting work, which gave him the flexibility to be more present for Jacob. He had also joined a local community group, where he met people who inspired him to grow in ways he hadn't considered before. At one of the group's events, Alex was asked to speak about resilience. Standing in front of an audience, he shared his story, not just the pain but also the lessons he had learned. Life will test you, Alex said, his voice steady. It'll throw challenges at you that you never saw coming. But those moments don't define you. What defines you is how you choose to rise from them. For me, it was about focusing on what truly mattered. My son, my integrity, and the future I wanted to create. The past is just a chapter. The future? That's the story we get to write. The room erupted into applause, and Alex felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Sharing his journey wasn't just cathartic, it was empowering. That night, as Alex tucked Jacob into bed, his son looked up at him with a question that caught him off guard. Dad, do you think we're happier now? Alex thought for a moment, then smiled. Yeah, buddy. I think we are. Because now, we're free to be ourselves and focus on what really matters. And that's you and me, Team Carter. Jacob grinned, holding up a fist for a bump. Team Carter forever. As Alex left the room, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had faced the darkest moments of his life and come out stronger, more focused, and more grateful for the things that truly mattered. So, to our viewers, what would you do if faced with betrayal? Would you let it break you, or would you use it as fuel to build something better? Alex's story reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, there's light waiting at the end of the tunnel. It's not the betrayal that defines you, it's how you rise from it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Midnight Affair. Join us next time for another tale of love, loss, and redemption. And remember, every ending can be a new beginning. This isn't the end for Alex, it's the beginning.